cities. But first, here is the weekly stock market recap. The S&P 500 down 0.1%, the NASDAQ down 0.4%, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average down 0.2%. You know, for most Americans, the money that they receive from their tax refund is an important part of their household finances and their budget. But according to the Internal Revenue Service, the average tax refund this year down about 11% compared to the year before. Financial advisor Mark Grywacheski joins us this morning with what you think is maybe causing this sudden decline in the average tax refund.
A very good morning to you, David. Good to see you again. Well, all these pandemic-related stimulus measures that have caused a lot of volatility in tax refunds over the past few years. For example, in 2022, the average tax refund was about 13% higher. You know, this year, as you just pointed out, it's actually declined by about 11%. And the main reason for this 11% decline, David, is that a number of these pandemic-related tax credits and stimulus programs have expired. So I wouldn't read too much into this, David. You know, the creation or elimination of these stimulus measures has caused refunds to be higher in some years and lower in others. For me, the bigger concern for taxpayers, though, David, comes in 2025, a few years down the road, when most of those tax cuts that were implemented back in 2018 are set to expire, unless these tax cuts do get extended. Even the very lowest tax brackets for those low-income families are set to go higher.
You know, a recent survey by Bankrate said that most taxpayers say that they will use their tax refund to either pay off some debt or put it into savings. So what other suggestions would you have for how people may be spending that refund?
First of all, David, it's completely understandable why people want to use their refund to one, either pay off their debt, or two, add it to their savings. For the past 2.5 years, high inflation has forced millions of Americans to either take on a lot more credit card debt or in many cases, to actually start pulling money from their savings account, their retirement accounts, just to keep up with rising prices. If possible, you know, my number one, I think, piece of advice would be try and build up your cash reserves. There's more and more consensus, David, the U.S. economy will slide into some type of recession this year, most likely, I think, in the second half of the year. Now, we don't know if this will be a mild recession or will it be, you know, a little bit more of a severe recession. But also another factor to consider is to what extent will any potential recession then impact and start creeping into the U.S. labor market, and these extra cash reserves that, you know, maybe you can stash away a little bit can provide some emergency funding in the event of potential layoffs, or at least until we get through this expected rough patch in the economy.
Yeah, and they say usually about 3 to 6 months is what you should have kind of in the bank for covering bills. So that would be, you know, if you're getting a refund, definitely a good thing to be kind of shooting for. But you've also argued that we should be expecting inflation to remain historically high for the rest of this year and into 2024. But the Labor Department recently reported that the rate of inflation declined from 6% to 5%. So does this change your mind at all?
I wish it did, David, but, you know, unfortunately it doesn't. You know, look, I've long argued, even going back into the early phases of 2021, that inflation wouldn't be, one, short term, and two, it wouldn't be mild as many people were projecting at the time, but that instead it would be much longer lasting and much more severe. But here's the ultimate challenge, though, David, with inflation. Even though inflation has fallen from its peak of 8.9% in June down to 5%, it's going to take some time for us to return to that ideal 2% target rate of inflation we ultimately want to get back to. And remember, this inflation was caused by the government dropping about $6 trillion in pandemic stimulus money onto the economy. And what do consumers, what do businesses, what do state and local governments, tend to do with all of that money? They tend to spend it. And that creates a tremendous upward pressure on consumer prices. And even today, more than 2 years past this $6 trillion in spending, there's still 38% more US dollars circulating around the economy than there was before the pandemic. And all of that money, David, in my opinion, means that it's going to keep inflation historically high, at least into 2024. So inflation gradually coming down, but long ways to go.
All right. Thank you so much, Mark. We will see you again next Monday.